The topics and opinions expressed on the following show are solely those of the host and their guests, and not those of W4CS Radio, its employees, or affiliates. W4CS makes no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for listening to the Cancer Support Network on W4CS.com.
Everyone, and welcome back to Survive and Live Well, tips to treat and beat cancer. As always, we strive to inspire you and bring you information that will improve both your quality and quantity of life. If you would like to ask questions today, you can enter them in the chat room at the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. If you want to use your real name, other than the one they've given you, you can hover over your guest name, click on the black arrow, and sign in. If you missed any part of last week's show, or the show entirely, on lymphedema, you can find the replay on my show archives on my site, www.ellenjacobs.com. So 2 years ago, Angelina Jolie underwent a preventive double mastectomy. Recently, she opted to have her ovaries removed. Jolie shared with the world that she consulted with both Eastern and Western doctors and explored alternative medicine as an option before opting for surgery. She also made it very clear to women that she did not get the surgery based solely on her BRCA1 gene mutation, and encourages women to not rush to surgery, but to heavily weigh all their options and explore non-surgical techniques. I like that as well, because you know what I say about options. If you don't know your options, you don't have any. So this is all good, as after her first surgery, the social media went to war hashing out her decision and taking sides. So let me set the record straight. It's not for us to decide, so the war is called off. No winners and no losers. She did what she felt she needed to do. With cancer, there is no one answer. There's no one choice. So while it's not for any of us to approve or disapprove of her decisions, it brings to mind an excellent question. What can women learn from cancer prevention from Angelina Jolie's surgeries? I'd say quite a bit. So today we will chat with an expert on the subject, the amazing Dr. Christine Horner. Dr. Horner is the award-winning author of Waking the Warrior Goddess, Dr. Christine Horner's program to protect against and fight breast cancer, the most comprehensive guide to research-proven natural approaches to prevent and fight cancer. Dr. Horner is one of the country's leading authorities on breast cancer prevention. And I will definitely say, if you have not read Waking the Warrior Goddess, you need to pick up a copy. It was the first edition way back when, was the first book I ever picked up after my diagnosis. And I love, love, love the book. And the new one is even better. So if you haven't gotten it, you can find the book on Dr. Horner's website, ChristineHorner.com, and you can find it on my website under the shop page, and of course you can find it on Amazon and most stores. So welcome back, Dr. Horner. So great to have you here with us today.
Thank you. It's such a pleasure to be back.
Well, you're my inspiration, so we really love having you here.
Oh, you're sweet. Thank you.
Thanks. So, Doctor, what was your reaction to Angelina Jolie's decision to have her ovaries removed? Do you think this was best for her situation?
Well, there's so many different things. It's really kind of a complex, decision. So there's so many different things that you have to weigh into making a decision like that. And, her biggest situation is that she watched her mother, her grandmother, and her aunt die of cancer. And you really can't, kind of underestimate the emotional trauma that occurs when you watch, very intimately and closely watch, the people that you love and your family, dying around you. And so, me working with breast cancer patients in particular, it's like when you've watched somebody die like that, it's extraordinarily traumatic, and you know that you've got that genetic mutation that puts you at a higher risk, and it kind of like doesn't matter what a person, a physician or whatever could say, that you've got some other options with it. It's just the emotional trauma from it. Almost every single day you wake up and you think, okay, is this the day that it's going to get me? And she had a scare. Now, there was a rise in her inflammatory markers. She didn't have a rise in her tumor markers, and when they did the investigation, everything, turned out okay. But, she even wrote about how she had like 5 days of, before the testing and all that kind of stuff, thinking, is this it? Like she's got it. And that kind of scare is just, it's extreme. So it's very understandable why she would have chosen, because of that, to say, look, I don't want to have to go through that again. Let's just go ahead and take them out. Now, to her credit, in her op-ed, she did say that, this isn't the only choice. I'm not really advocating it, that there are other choices that women, can take, and they should certainly investigate them, besides this. And definitely one of the reasons why you wouldn't want to take your ovaries out is, I remember as a general surgeon years and years and years ago, it was a routine thing that was recommended. I didn't do it, but they were like, oh, if you're doing abdominal surgery, you might as well just take the ovaries out to prevent ovarian cancer, and it's like, first of all, ovarian cancer is actually a fairly uncommon tumor. It's just not that, it doesn't happen with that much commonality, and so the risk of developing it is pretty low. And even if you have this BRCA1 gene mutation, which puts you at a higher risk for developing breast and ovarian cancer, incidentally, it's not just breast and ovarian cancer. It also increases the risk of cancers of the cervix and uterus and pancreas and colon and stomach and gallbladder and even melanoma. And the reason is the BRCA1 gene. Everybody has one, and what we're talking about is a mutation or abnormality of the BRCA1 gene, but the BRCA1 gene is a tumor suppression gene. So it has a couple different functions, but one of them is to produce proteins that help to suppress the growth of tumors, and when there's a certain mutation in it that causes that elevated risk, it causes these proteins to be shaped abnormally so they don't function well. And then the other thing is that the BRCA1 gene is involved in the DNA repair mechanisms. So we have, our DNA is our blueprint for our physiology and anatomy, and it gives instructions for our bodies. And so all the time there's damage that occurs to the DNA from oxygen-free radicals, toxins, and various different things. Now, that's normal. So we have within us this repair team, basically, that is set up to recognize the damage to the DNA and to repair it. And so that there's a problem in the people that have the BRCA1 gene mutation where that the repair mechanisms don't work as well. So that means that you can have this damaged DNA, and it can pass on the messages, which are not the correct messages. And the most common problem when you have damaged DNA with the wrong messages is to have an increased risk of developing cancers, associated with that. So
right.
If you, like we're saying, okay, let's go ahead and take out, the breast tissue and the ovaries. Well, in the BRCA1 gene mutations, I'm just giving you a little background here before we get to the main questions, but so the risk of developing breast cancer, if you have a BRCA1 gene mutation, is in the range of about 40 to 80%, which is pretty high by the time somebody reaches 80 years old. So it increases, over a lifetime. Now, what's interesting is that when you do the kind of go back in the family lineage 100 years, we find that the incidence of breast cancer was 1/3 of what it is today. And you can say, well, why is that? Well, one of the reasons is that the various different things that we know that contribute to the elevated risk of breast cancer in women who do not have the genetic mutation, it's exactly the same thing for women who do. So, diet and lifestyle, or, all the things that I talked about in my book that you either need to avoid or favor, those are the main things. And we've really gotten out of balance as far as the things that you need to do in order to be healthy with, our standard American diet and lifestyle.
Right.
Yeah, so even, just correcting for that is going to reduce the risk, tremendously.
Right, and based on what you said, it would sound like it certainly beats the, let's see, we could remove our ovaries, our cervix, our pancreas, our skin, all of those things to prevent breast cancer, to prevent cancer from this mutation. So I'm thinking, yes, as you said, our breast cancer rates are different for another reason. We're blaming the wrong culprit.
Yeah. And then for ovarian cancer, interestingly, the rates are 11% to 40% increased risk. Well, that means that the chances of you developing it are way less than they are of you getting it in the first place, right? Even if you have the BRCA1 gene mutation. So now the interesting thing is that there's a lot of things that you can do. And, well, first let me just backtrack. One other fact is that the BRCA1 gene mutation is extremely rare. So there was this whole phenomenon called the, Jolie-Angelina effect, where people started going in to get all these genetic testings done, thinking, oh my God, could I have it, or it runs in my family, kind of thing. But the incidence of it is extremely rare. It's less than 1%. So the chances are 99.9% that you don't have it. And if you find that certain cancers run in your family, the most likely explanation is because you ate the same foods, you processed stress the same way, you had the same, kind of lifestyle, and that's why. But, what's really great is that there's been a lot of research that's been done looking at various different natural products, we'll call them, that will specifically affect the BRCA1 gene and then cause a, tremendous decrease in the incidence of, at least breast and ovarian cancer.
Right.
So there's, definitely things that you can do. Yeah.
Before we get to that, can we just, Jolie did say she explored other non-surgical things, cancer prevention techniques. So before we get into your recommendations, what did she do? What were some of the techniques that she did that we should know about?
I don't know what she did. So I know that she explored them as an option, So basically, what we'll be talking about is those things. Now, one thing that she did mention was taking birth control pills. Now, of course, she's she dealt with Western-trained doctors, and she said she also met with naturopaths. Now, Western-trained doctors will only offer you pharmaceuticals and surgery, whereas, a naturopath will offer you, nutritional supplement options, lifestyle, options and that kind of thing, which, by the way, has great research on it. So it's not like it's, some witchcraft that, doesn't have any research on it. But for her, she did specifically say that taking birth control pills, and it's true that birth control pills are something that can decrease, or have been shown to decrease the incidence of ovarian cancer by 50%. However, it increases your risk of breast cancer.
Right.
So,
which is much more common.
Yeah. So the funny thing about Western treatments is it seems that they always there's some significant trade-off or cost that comes with it. And if you're looking at natural approaches, which, really when you think about it, even 100 years ago, before we had Western medicine really available in the way that it is now, for thousands and thousands and thousands of years, human beings existed on the planet by altering diet and lifestyle, right? And that we were given this whole pharmacy of herbs and plants to help keep us well. And we have traditional systems of medicine like Ayurveda, which has been around for 5,000 years, and traditional Chinese medicine. And what's fascinating, too, is that when we do modern research on some of the plants that they've said, okay, this is what they were used for, we find that not only do they work for that, but they work like, thousands of times better than we thought that they would. So there's time-tested, approaches, and now we've got modern research which is confirming it, that, using botanicals and, as I said, dietary supplements and lifestyle choices are, things that tremendously impact our health, unlike what I was taught in medical school, that it didn't really have much of an effect. It's like, they were wrong. It actually is the thing that has the greatest effect, on our risk of developing cancers or not. So,
and what you said is really significant, because it's not just you didn't learn it, right? It wasn't taught, which is now coming to really bite patients because their doctors,
Right.
through their own, not their fault, are ignorant on the value of diet and
Yes.
exercise and stress reduction and all
Right.
these other things,
Right.
and right to the detriment of their patients. And it's right; they don't recommend some of these things that would be
Right.
yeah.
I mean, there's a little tiny progress. I mean, certainly there's been, in the area of exercise and looking at some dietary factors and stuff, which we completely ignored. I mean, I didn't have a single class of nutrition when I was in medical school. Well, that's how much we ignored it. And then we'd say, oh, botanicals, they don't work. They're just kind of watered down pharmaceuticals. And we would, give people glazed donuts and green Jell-O and stuff, post-op. It's like, really? Okay, let's put that all into perspective. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly right. Okay, so we've now promised our audience these practical tips. So let's get right into what can we do?
Sure. Well, I just want to do one other backtrack about why you wouldn't want to take your ovaries out before age 45. So it's not a minor procedure, like what she decided to do to take her ovaries out. She's 39, but before age 45, because it's a castration, basically. And it's always, as I said, funny to me, like, is this practice about when we are in the abdomen of someone for something unrelated. Oh, just take their ovaries out so they don't get ovarian cancer. Well, then I'd say to the guys, well, should we just take your testicles out? I mean, it's like, it's the same thing. I mean, it's exactly the same thing.
Absolutely.
So here's what the research shows is that if you take a woman's ovaries out before age 45, there is a 170% all-cause mortality, a higher incidence of it, meaning all the different causes that can, of death. It's 170% higher if you do it before age 45. The incidence of cardiovascular disease goes up by 7 times compared to women who keep their ovaries. There's also an increase in dementia, Parkinson's disease, osteoporosis, and of course, some declines in psychological well-being and sexual function. And it's not like the hormones, taking hormone replacement therapy corrects all that stuff. It doesn't. It helps, but it doesn't correct it all. So,
and if it's synthetic, it adds to your risk of breast cancer. If it's garbage,
that's exactly right. Then you have that too. So it's like, well, you really have to, weigh these options, heavily. Now, the good news is, as I said, is there's been a lot of research that's been done that looks at, what are the things that can help to lower your risk, which is a topic of my book. But beyond that, there have been studies that look specifically at, a variety of different nutritional supplements and botanicals, and then look at it in relationship to the effect that it has on the BRCA1 gene mutation. So one of the most amazing studies they did is there was a study that was done in Europe where they had a higher number of BRCA1 gene mutation families there, but they took 200 women that had the BRCA1 gene mutation, and they did a double-blinded placebo-controlled study. So this is our gold standard. I mean, it gives us the very best information. And what they did is they gave one group a placebo, and the other group got the mineral selenium. So selenium, costs nothing, right? It's normally found in our soil, and it's involved in the antioxidant systems in the body. So one thing that we're aware of is that in areas where selenium is very low in the soil, which unfortunately is becoming more and more common because of our growing practices, the soil gets nutrient depleted, and versus areas where it's very high, you see like half the incidences of various different cancers almost across the board in relationship to the selenium levels in the soil. But the other thing is that selenium is actually involved in the DNA repair mechanisms. So their thinking was that when they took blood samples of women with the BRCA1 gene mutation, they found an increased number of broken pieces of DNA, and it's little DNA fragments because the repair mechanisms aren't as good. So they didn't repair the DNA, and you had these broken pieces. So what they kind of hypothesized is they said, okay, if we gave women selenium, then it would enhance the DNA repair mechanisms and potentially lower the risk of developing the cancers. So half the group got selenium, half the group got placebo, so nobody knew who was taking what. And after 2 years in this study, they found that the women who were taking the selenium supplementation had half the incidence of breast cancer. I mean, so the people who weren't taking it, it was like it was 200% lower incidence of breast cancer compared to the women who were not taking selenium. I mean, that's fairly spectacular. And when they looked at the blood, they found that the DNA fragments, when they found the increased number of fragments, it went back down to normal.
Wow.
This was, the mineral selenium. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a great one. Now, omega-3 fatty acids, I mean, that's something that we know profoundly affect our health, and everybody should be taking supplemental omega-3 fatty acids because, there's so many structures in our body and hormones and so forth that are made out of fat. So we have to have fat in our diet, but the type of fat that we have in our diet is the most important thing. And omega-3 fatty acids have really been found to be the healthiest types of fats that we can consume. They lower inflammation tremendously. In fact, there were studies doing a comparative of various different substances and what type of anti-inflammatory power they had, and they found that omega-3 fatty acids, of everything they tested, had more anti-inflammatory power than anything else. We use it as a construction material for our body, and so obviously whatever type of fat you're consuming, that's what your body is going to make itself out of. And when you eat more omega-3 fatty acids than the membranes of the cells, which are all made out of fat, they become more fluid, and they function a whole lot better. If you're eating trans fats, partially hydrogenated fats or saturated animal fats, the membranes become stiffer and they don't function as well. So we find just kind of across the board with every kind of disease, from dementia to arthritis to heart disease to cancers, that if you have a higher ratio of omega-3 fatty acids, the incidences of those problems go down. Well, with omega-3s, they also found that it positively influenced the BRCA1 gene and could decrease. There was a French study done in 2007 that found that the incidence of BRCA1-related tumors were decreased by 30% in people who consumed higher levels of omega-3 fatty acids.
That's pretty significant.
It is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Another one's vitamin D. I mean, there's just been an explosion of research in vitamin D, and we know that it's lower in most disease states, including cancers. But there's also the vitamin D plays a direct effect on the BRCA1 gene and helps to stop the growth of breast and prostate cancer. So that vitamin D, the recommendations now are pretty much that everybody should be taking supplemental amounts, and the only way that you know that your levels are okay and that you're taking the appropriate amounts for you, because it varies from person to person, is to have your blood levels checked. And then,
that's absolutely right.
Yeah. So we do know, in the past we'd say 400 international units, which we know is way too low for everybody, and that's more in the range of about 2,000. But if you have a disease state, or sometimes people can have some metabolic issues, with it, where they may require way more than that. So that's kind of a good thing to check.
Right. And recently they finally put the minimum up to 30, but really that's way too low. If you have cancer, it's got to be upwards of 60, that level. So what you're saying is absolutely right. They need to get your levels checked, and don't just arbitrarily take a huge pile of vitamin D. You're right. You want to check the levels and find the optimal amount for you, and to keep those levels up, because I think oncologists are really still in the dark that 30 is still way too low, and that could be contributing to all this recurrence. So get those levels up and get those levels checked.
Yeah, and because it's a fat-soluble vitamin, it's very possible that you could get a toxicity with it because it gets stored in your fat. So it actually isn't, then you could think, just do mega doses with it, but you can, actually have a toxicity with it, although it's uncommon. But, just to kind of do a warning where you just don't want to haphazardly do massive amounts of it, you really need to kind of custom design it for, your own body.
That's right. And then you don't want to go over the 100 level, because that is really a toxic level. So if you're going to take any kind of therapeutic dose, you want to stay on top of those results. And I'll throw my 2 cents in that you want to make sure you're consuming or taking adequate K2 so that the calcium doesn't get to your arteries and joints. It gets right to those bones and good purposes.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Now, here's another really interesting study that was done in 2011 where they used the herb ginkgo biloba. So normally we think of that as something that helps with memory, and blood flow. I mean, that's kind of been the traditional uses with it. But what the researchers did was to test it with BRCA1 associated ovarian cancers, and they found that in the test tube, at least, what it did was to inhibit the growth of it, like completely. And so then another study was done that was looking at it, physiologically, and again, they found that it had a really profound influence in lowering the risk of BRCA1 associated ovarian cancers, and their estimate was that it would reduce the risk by 2/3. Basically. Wow. So you're cutting it down to about 1/3, simple ginkgo biloba, which I thought was a great, fact with that. What the interesting thing is a lot of the key kind of standout herbs and supplements that I found that lowered the risk of breast cancer that I, mentioned in my book. Well, the same ones are some things that have a direct effect on the BRCA1 gene as well. So flax seeds, for instance. I mean, we know that flax seeds is a superfood. Even the World Health Organization has called them that, and they're particularly beneficial in helping to lower the risk of breast cancer. And they have several standout qualities to them. One, they're high in omega-3 fatty acids, but they also have 100 times more of a substance called lignans than any other known edible plant. And lignans help to give structure to the cell wall, but they have about 12 different anti-cancer properties to them, and some of them work exactly like chemotherapeutic drugs, but they've got like another 10 or, dozen or more other ways that they work too. So there was a study done in 2013 where they looked at flax seeds and found that the lignans in the flax seeds were something that had a direct effect on the BRCA1 gene and helped to protect against not only breast cancer but also ovarian cancer too. Soy foods. Now, of course, there's lots of controversy about soy.
Oh, but I'm glad you're talking about this because it's a great topic.
Yeah. Well, there's lots of controversy, and, a lot of the issues there's some complexities to it. So one is, we genetically modify and heavily spray most of the crops of soy in this country, so you do not want to consume those. However, organically grown whole soy foods, which is, something that had occurred for thousands and thousands of years in Asia and where they consume a lot of soy, we find almost a direct linear relationship between the amount consumed and the reduction in breast and, believe it or not, ovarian cancer too. So eating whole soy foods, there's plenty of studies that are supportive of it. It shows that it's even safe for people who have had breast cancer, but again, it has to be organic. Do not consume it as supplements. I mean, that can be dangerous. It's got to be like edamame, miso soup, that kind of thing. So there was a study in 2014 that found that women who regularly consume soy dropped their risk of ovarian cancer by up to 70%. And there was a dose-response relationship, meaning like a direct linear relationship, so the more that was consumed, the lower the risk, was. So again, there's all this controversy with it, but what the research really shows, there's thousands of studies, population studies and so forth, is that if you're eating organic soy, whole foods, edamame, miso soup, and tempeh, that kind of thing, that those have a protective effect and, are fine to consume and, can be extremely protective. And again, avoiding anything that's not organic, avoiding anything that's like concentrated soy supplementation. You want to stay away from that stuff.
Right. No soy dogs, no soy cheese, guys. Just real unadulterated soy.
That's right. Or, the supplements. It's like, you really don't want like powdered stuff. You just don't want to do that. Yeah, you want to avoid it. Yeah.
Yes.
Now, here's the fun thing for those of us who are coffee drinkers.
Right.
Coffee gets a lot of bad rap, but actually, there's it's a good example of something where certain foods aren't a black and white, they're bad or they're good. They're kind of gray. So they can have some really good health benefits, and then maybe they have some detriments too. And caffeinated coffee is definitely one of those. So caffeinated coffee can, for certain people, make them completely crazy and increase their cortisol and make them nervous and increase anxiety and all that kind of stuff. But for the people that don't have that reaction to them, there's some amazing studies, done showing that it decreases the risk of diabetes, Parkinson's disease, and it also has a significant reduction in breast cancer in particular, and for people who have the BRCA1 gene, even more so. So women who consume regularly, caffeinated coffee that are normal, genetically normal, have a 40% reduction in breast cancer, and if you have a BRCA1 gene mutation, the caffeinated coffee actually has a direct effect on the BRCA1 gene, and it reduces the risk by 70%. Yeah, amazing. So those are just some of the, kind of nutritional supplements that are the key ones, as far as the research is concerned with having direct effects on the BRCA1 gene. Now, melatonin, which is our sleep hormone, that's another thing that they found has a direct effect on the BRCA1 gene. Now, in normal people, it lowers the risk. So to increase your melatonin levels naturally, the best thing to do is to go to bed by 10 p.m., and get up before 6 a.m. And those are considered the optimal hours for sleep. If you go to bed by 10 o'clock, there is a spike in your melatonin levels that occur between midnight and 2 a.m. And you really don't want to miss that spike, because if you do, the consequences are quite spectacular. So what they found is that melatonin is not just our sleep hormone, but it is also affects it's an antioxidant. It affects our hormone levels, so it will actually lower the levels of estrogen and prolactin, which is another hormone that has an influence of increasing the risk of breast cancer. It also stimulates the immune system, so it keeps our immune system healthier, so all sorts of different kinds of functions to it. And it also interacts with other hormones. So, nothing's in isolation. In Western medicine, we love to be isolationists, and the truth is that everything interacts with everything else. So if your melatonin levels are screwed up, then it affects all your other hormones. And so they actually found that when you go to bed at 10 o'clock at night, your cells know that they're supposed to kind of shut down and go through their cleaning and detoxification phase that they do, during the night. And most people start to get hungry again and may snack on something, and your cells are actually shut down and won't receive it. So they become more insulin resistant. So that insulin resistance is something that increases your risk of diabetes, causes your blood sugar levels to go up, that increases your risk of cancers. But basically what they found is that if you stay up to midnight on a regular basis, your risk of heart disease, diabetes, and obesity, and cancers are almost twice as high. So, sometimes people say, oh, I don't eat that much on my total calorie intake. Why can't I lose weight? And it's like, well, what time do you go to bed?
Yeah.
That's one of the key things. So if you're a night owl, then the recommendations are that you go to bed 15 minutes earlier every week. So you're kind of gradually getting yourself back to going to bed by 10 o'clock and getting up by 6 o'clock. And then most people have said they're absolutely amazed at how they feel when they start doing that. And in Ayurveda, which is a traditional system of medicine from India, which I'm certified in, we talk about this concept of that everything that you do, even every thought that you think, is something that brings your body into balance or takes your body out of balance. And when your body's in balance, it enhances your inner healing intelligence. When it's out of balance, you get a block basically to the flow of that intelligence, and that's, the inner healing intelligence can't keep you well anymore. So going to bed before 10 o'clock actually has so many profound medicinal qualities to it. It's considered one of the 3 pillars of health in Ayurveda, but it infuses your body's inner healing intelligence with so much intelligence that you can really have some, profound changes in a positive way for your health. So I've had a number of women I've worked with that have menopausal symptoms and hot flashes and so forth, and the first thing that they did, I tell them to do, go to bed by 10 o'clock. They do that, and guess what? Their hot flashes go away.
Puts a new spin on that. Early to bed, early to rise makes a man healthy, wealthy, and wise.
That's right.
Totally new spin on it. It does all of those things. Makes you mentally wise, makes you healthy wise, makes you lots of things. I don't know about wealthy, but it's going to make you wealthy because you're healthy enough to work efficiently.
Yeah. Now, Angelina Jolie did say something which I thought was really great too, where she acknowledged that even taking her breasts off and taking her ovaries out, that it did not drop her risk down to 0. And of course, those other cancers that we talked about that are increased with the BRCA1 gene, like the pancreas and uterus and colon and stomach and gallbladder. I mean, skin. Obviously, you can't take those things out. Right. So she said, in her op-ed, that I'm going to research, how to keep my immune system strong, because that is the most important thing. And it really is. It's like keeping our immune system is a thing that keeps us well. And we have all these different cells in our immune system that there's certain ones that go out and they look for foreign invaders like viruses and bacteria and cancer cells, because we actually form cancer cells all the time, and that's a natural form, part of our physiology. And if you have a very strong immune system, the immune system will find those cancer cells and eliminate them. And if there's a problem with your immune system, which, there's all sorts of things that you can do to really, cause your immune system to not work very well, like staying up too late at night, like being under lots of stress. I mean, that's something that really slugs our immune system. And eating sugar. I mean, that's one of the key things that we find in our diet that has the worst effect on the immune system, where there's a number of studies that show that after a high sugary meal, the absolute number and function of the immune system cells will drop by 90% for 5 hours afterwards.
Isn't that amazing?
So that's a sure way to really, weaken your immune system. So there's other things, little tricks that you can do to help besides the lifestyle things, and one of them is medicinal mushrooms. So there's a lot of different types of medicinal mushrooms, and all of them kind of have in common where they will have a strengthening effect to the immune system. Now, I have a formula that I like particularly well, which is called AHCC, or active hexose correlated compound. Is kind of the generic base for it, but it actually is made out of Japan, and they've done hundreds of studies on it, and it shows that it helps to support every single cell type in the immune system, and really strengthens it. And it's so effective that it helps to lower the risk of many different kinds of cancers, and they actually prescribe it in the hospitals in Japan for cancer patients because the survival statistics are so much better. And,
isn't it amazing how when you leave the United States you get such great advice in the hospital?
I know. It is amazing. But, I discovered it a few years ago, and I have to say I'm wild about this stuff. So I started taking it like, I don't know, 2-3 years ago or something like that. And, I do lots and lots of flying. And it seems like no matter what, and I have a very clean diet. I'm very pure. I'm a vegetarian. I do juicing. I do all that kind of stuff. But I'm telling you, flying just sucks the life out of me. And I would get colds, a couple times a year, from doing that. I just couldn't escape it. And ever since I started taking this, I have not gotten a cold. And if I feel like anything where it's just, you get that early prodromal kind of like, something in my throat.
Feeling.
Yeah, so then I up the dose like crazy, and it goes away. I'm like, yay! So, to me, it's like one of the easiest things that you can do. I always say you start with a supplement because we really do have research that shows, that they work. And the name supplement means that they're supposed to supplement a healthy diet and lifestyle.
They're not your diet.
That's right. But, it's a great way to start because no matter where you are, it's like everybody can start on, some dietary supplements today, like the vitamin D, and that, turmeric is also another one I always, highly recommend. It's like the number one anti-cancer spice and works in 150 different ways is what they've, found. But that, turmeric, green tea, some of these things, you don't have to necessarily drink them. You can get them in supplement form. The ginkgo biloba, as I said, for the ovarian cancer. Omega-3 fatty acids you absolutely want to take supplementally. You just can't get enough in your diet. Selenium, that, mineral, flax seeds, those kinds of things. So starting with things like that, you can actually give yourself like a tremendous amount of boost. And some of those, various dietary supplements have been shown to cut the risk in half, of various different cancers. Mm-hmm. But then you work on, really cleaning up your diet and your lifestyle as much as you can, because again, those are meant to be supplemental. And the great thing is like we get into these bad habits and our body starts craving the bad habits, like a drug almost. And once you start doing some things like going to bed by 10 o'clock and maybe doing some stress-reducing techniques, which are so important, like choose something that you're doing daily, from even, simple breathing exercises to, I practice transcendental meditation, just 20 minutes, twice a day has been shown to have, really profound effects. Yoga, walks in nature, things like that to really reduce your stress level.
Because they really know that stress is it's bigger than just makes you feel lousy. It really makes you sick in so many ways. Whether it's the stem cells, whether it's the immune system, it does so much damage to you.
Yeah, it does. And even the National Institutes of Health, which are fairly conservative, said that 90% of all illnesses, physical and mental, have stress as a major component of it. So, we know that for sure. Mm-hmm. But as soon as you start doing some of these healthy habits, and, here's another incredible, beautiful thing that I found when I was doing all that research. The power of even doing one thing. It's like almost every single thing that I found that had a protective effect reduced the risk in half. It was just like, boom, cut it in half. And if you do two healthy things together, they invariably have synergistic reactions with each other, making each other more effective. So, for instance, there was a study showing that if you take turmeric and green tea in the same meal or, as a supplement, that the green tea enhanced the anti-cancer effects of turmeric by 3 times, and turmeric enhanced the anti-cancer effects of green tea by 8 times. So if you take advantage of these synergistic effects, then you get this multiplication, and it becomes incredibly simple, to dramatically lower your risk. And then in addition to that, the more you're kind of balancing your body and increasing that inner healing intelligence, the more your body then starts craving healthy things. Like suddenly you don't want to eat junk food, or like, ooh, that really has a bad effect on you instantly.
You do lose that taste. You really lose that taste. It doesn't look appealing. It doesn't smell appealing. Or maybe sometimes it smells appealing, but it definitely doesn't look appealing, and you wouldn't want to eat it. You just look at it and say,
That's right. Yeah. I was at the gym this morning, and the guy who runs the juice bar there, he had a great story where he said, he's got kids, and this for his daughter. He says, so this is what I do is I say to my kids, all week long you have to eat, healthy food, and then one day of the week I'll let you eat whatever you want to eat, So his daughter wanted like a cupcake or something like that, which she'd had before. And so as soon as she ate it, she felt sick and was having stomach cramps and stuff. And she said, oh, that's really, it doesn't sit well with me anymore. I don't want it, So the more your body gets infused and healthy, the less you're going to have cravings towards things, and the more you're going to crave, things that are going to even make you healthier. Yeah, so it becomes easier, really.
I find it with my kids. Especially my younger one. He's constantly saying, don't you have more vegetables? Do you have any fruit-like stuff in this house?
Oh,
what do you want for dinner? I'll have a romaine salad. No, I don't want the pasta, but I'll have, it's great.
Yeah, and it doesn't take very long is the thing, too. I mean, in most of the studies that have been done on, like, human addiction and stuff like that, I mean, within 3 weeks, I mean, you start to get some really significant changes, like in the taste buds, anatomically, so the things that tasted good to you before, let's say that you cut sweets out or cut salt out for...
Uh-oh, I think we've lost Dr. Horner. Okay, so what she was saying was it doesn't take long. It doesn't take long. Of course, my kids had the added bonus that I ate a lot of that stuff when I was kids, which I think does make a difference. But it doesn't take long to retrain your body. Well, hopefully she'll call back in. We just lost her. But it doesn't take long, and I do urge you, after all, what we discussed earlier in the show was if you go back 200, 300 years ago, people didn't have breast cancer at the rates that we have now. They still had the genetic mutations, but they did not have the high rates of breast cancers. And that's not because we don't have the gene now. Remember, it's our environment. It's that soil depletion that she mentioned when she spoke about the selenium. It is everything that is in our environment, the toxins in our environment, the stress in our environment, the EMFs in our environment that are blocking things like melatonin and blocking so many things. It's things we have in our environment today that we never had before. And that's why we have these increased rates of cancer, not because we have these genes or not because we have estrogen or any of these other things that we are led to believe is the reason for our cancer. There's also the epigenetic effect that things, emotional traumas and foods and things that happened to your ancestors are really, especially maybe your great-grandparents, your grandparents, are actually coming to play in your life now, which is a whole other topic for another day. If again, I mentioned Dr. Christine Horner's book, Waking the Warrior Goddess, and you can find that on her website, drchristinehorner.com. And again, it's on my shop page. It's also in my recommended reading section on that page, and of course at everything. Oh, we have Dr. Horner back.
I'm back. I don't know what happened.
I was chatting away about you, so don't you worry about a thing. We didn't miss it. So I was just kind of reiterating a few of your points that you mentioned, which were all tremendous, so I couldn't get that in the last minute and a half, but I did remind everyone once again where they can find your book. So we have just a few minutes left, and we can either continue with what you were saying, or there was one question that came in from the chat room that I thought we didn't cover, and that was the question was, I am hypo, so I'm not supposed to eat raw flaxseed and soy. Can you tell me
what?
Hypothyroid, I think she means.
Oh, hypothyroid. Okay, so that's false information too. So the soy food, for instance, this is a thing where, when I was first a doctor and even kind of, in the early years and of, working as a surgeon and everything, being able to read the research is actually a very specific skill that you have to be trained for as far as understanding what kind of data you can get based on how a study is set up. And so if you have been really trained in it, which is not something that, you get a little bit of that when you're in med school residency and that kind of thing, but it wasn't until I quit my job as a plastic surgeon and decided to really dedicate myself full time to, teaching people about how to become and stay healthy naturally. And so then my life was really about, reading research like crazy and learning about how do you look at these various different studies and interpret them and say, whatever interpretation they came up with, well, you can't do that, based on what the study design is. So the interesting thing about soy is that they said, okay, it interferes with iodine absorption. Now, when we look at how studies are done, we do things in the laboratory, in a petri dish, and then we do the next phase we do is animal studies, and usually they're done in rodents or rats. Then we do them in human beings or do clinical trials. And so, when we discovered, a couple decades ago that all the research was being done on men and was not being done on women, right? And so they started including women in studies, and they found that women had a lot of differences, as we know, from our male counterpoints, and that we don't, necessarily have the same kind of physiological reactions to various different things. Well, if men and women are different like that, and we're the same species, supposedly, right? Sometimes we wonder. We do see that there's huge differences sometimes when we're trying to translate animal studies into human studies. And so
Dr. Horner, we've got about 30 seconds. So,
Oh, okay. So the studies that show that there's an iodine problem, it happened in animals. So rats metabolize soy completely different than humans do, and it doesn't happen in human beings. There's no studies confirming that it happens in human beings. So it's okay to do flax seeds and okay to do soy. They don't interfere with the absorption if you're hypothyroid.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you, Christine. This has been so helpful. Knowing your options and taking control of one's health, that is what it is all about. So thank you very much for joining us, Christine.
You're welcome. We're welcome. And then, check out my website, drchristinehorner.com, drchristinehorner.com, and you can find my book and also a free newsletter. And I do consultations for breast cancer patients, too. So, if you want to learn about how to do an integrative approach or any kind of questions that you might have, I have that available on my website.
Great. Thank you so much. And thank you all for listening. This has been Survive and Live Well on the Cancer Support Network, W4CS.com. If you missed any part of today's show or previous shows, you can replay them on iHeartRadio or find them on my website, www.ellenjacobs.com. This is your host, Ellen Jacobs, One-on-One Cancer Coaching. See you next week.
I can do anything. I am strong. I am invincible. I am woman. You can